I will shut the door. He was very quiet until I went live. Let's see. Okay, we will do a redo. All right. So, what I was saying is, I'm absolutely amazed by the just capabilities of restreaming as an example. So I was really excited because I was playing around with some of the video clips right before I went live, and found one of the countdown timers. So amazing. Yes. And I was also playing around. So if you do live streams, maybe this will be helpful to you. I was also playing around with the brand colors for the design, because I actually was just using another yellow, and that really isn't the same. It's not the same yellow that we use in our brand kit. So I'm really doing my best this year to get things dialed in for our brand kit and our brand guidelines between fonts, colors, icons. If you are an agency owner, then perhaps you can relate that it just, as a normal cycle of business, you end up putting some of your stuff to the side, and you're working on everyone else's, on your clients, which is so super important. There has to be a way to do your branding as well, along with your clients, if you're an agency. So this year, 2023, one of my big goals was to get our branding, our guidelines, everything I just said, dialed in, so that it's not, being pushed to the sidelines, which, of course, we all need to do that at one point or another, just because of priorities, just because of workloads. We get an influx of new clients. Of course, those are the priorities. However, we also need to make sure that someone on our team is keeping up and doing our work. So, yeah, perhaps you can relate. But it is super important that we're able to, of course, keep up with our brand guidelines. That was actually the big goal. Okay, obviously, uh, we work and strive very hard to make sure that we are meeting and exceeding our client expectations. But without a doubt, over the last couple years, some of the things related to what I was looking to do had to be, pushed to the side, so that we could get everything done that we needed to for our clients. But it's all been a learning process. And like I said, I'm super excited that I actually have our brand colors in there dialed in. That's really important. And it obviously serves as an example as well. So we can use our branding kit as an example. But really, at the end of the day, it's about outcomes. And what I wanted to speak to you about today is where you are to where you want to be. Now, It's November 1st. There is still time for you to get to where you want to be, or at least get closer to where you want to be by the end of the year. Now, I have been officially coaching since 2014, and I've conducted over 4,500 coaching sessions. One of the things that I see people do too much of is they attend events, and events, I mean either virtual or in person, okay? Doesn't matter if it's an in person networking event or if it's a virtual event. And then there is no action changing. I mean, sorry, there is no action taking place. Therefore, nothing is changing. So I don't need to say it because you've heard it many times. However, the wise man Einstein has told us, and it replays in our heads, that if we do the same thing, right, what are we going to get? Fill in the blanks. If we do the same thing, what are we going to get? The same outcomes, right? I know he had a different quote, but the idea that I'm explaining is what he was referring to. So, how I see it and what I've heard from information that I've collected from all of these coaching clients that I've worked with, I think people may tend to uh, they go to these events and then they think they're doing something. So, they're being active. So then of course the question becomes, are they taking the right amount of action? If we're in the coaching space, we've heard a lot about the 80-20 rule. We should all be living and working by the 80-20 rule. I don't know how many books are written on it, but one of my mentors is a big believer in it. That's what really particularly interested me. But if we follow the 80-20 rule, then we know that 80% of our results are generated by 20% of our actions, which is a great news story, right? Because if that means that 80% of our outcomes, what we're seeking to achieve, are created by only 20% of our actions, that means we do less to achieve more. Now, this sometimes confuses people because they don't know which actions to take to get the maximal outcomes. Back to my example as far as people staying busy attending these events. Sometimes these events, whether they're virtual or in person, can be time wasters and things that some people choose to hide behind because they say or they think, well, at least I'm doing something. If you're trying to build a coaching practice, you need to spend 20% of your time in front of your ideal audience every day. And that doesn't mean that some of this can't be automated, but until you get your messaging, until you get your story straight, You should really have as much in person action as possible. Now, what can that 20% involve? That 20% can involve adjunct coaching. If you don't have your own coaching clients, do some adjunct coaching for other organizations, preferably with your ideal client audience. Or maybe you don't know exactly who your ideal audience is, but could you potentially narrow it down to two or three? Besides not knowing what the best actions are to take, what I also find is clients often hesitate to explain who their ideal client is. And if that's you, it's okay. It's okay if you cannot clearly identify your ideal client yet. However, you at least need to have two or three potential ideal clients. Otherwise, you will consistently be spinning because those of us that have said that we can help anybody. We want to help everybody. We end up helping no one because we are not speaking to those problems, to those pain points that those clients have for being too vague. And what we want to be able to do is to attract those ideal clients by speaking those thoughts that are going on in their head, speaking to those pain points, providing solutions to those problems they have that they don't want. So that sounds a lot simpler, doesn't it? And believe me, you can do this. I know that if you're one of those people right now that's saying, I can help everybody. I It doesn't matter what industry you're in. I know that your heart's in the right place. However, I'm going to ask you to listen to what I'm saying and at least get it narrowed down to two to three possible ideal clients. And this is what I always like to assure my clients: just because you decide to go after one of those three ideal clients, unless you already have the ideal client identified, it does not mean that you have to stick with that ideal client forever. It can just be now. And then you can change it in the future. But if you're too broad, chances are, and I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you 100%, but I can tell you from the over the 4,500 coaching sessions that I've had, the ones that have come in and they have agreed, okay, I will narrow it down. So they usually start with two to three, and then they narrow it down to one, and then they're meeting and exceeding their goals. They're building their multiple six-figure practices because they have figured out what works, meaning they get clear on that ideal client. They're talking and repeating those problems that the ideal client has that they don't want. And then they're able to duplicate, duplicate, duplicate. And besides this, if you're too broad, I know you want to help a lot of people, but if you're too broad, then it almost doesn't allow us the ability to get the laser lucid clarity that we need, to really be able to dive in and dissect those problems, provide those solutions, because it kind of like more surface level. right? And we, as well as our clients, want to be the experts, want to be the go to people that our clients count on us for. And I'm not just speaking about coaching. I'm also speaking to founders and co-founders, people that have areas of specialty that are unique. Like for instance, I work with teams of scientists. They develop products in the biotech field and they also have some cosmetic problems or products. And I also work with technologists. Technologists, the technologists that I work with are predominantly service based. So they are providing services. Maybe it's fractional CISO services, maybe it's fractional CTO services. Those are more service based. But at this moment, the scientists that I'm working with are product based. Now, their messaging is very specific to the ideal client groups that they have, and they don't have more than three. So then, when we are testing this messaging, we can see what converts better, what takes their potential clients and customers through the journey from start to finish. You see, if we don't get that laser lucid clarity on who we serve, then chances are we aren't going to be able to achieve those optimal outcomes that those potential clients are seeking. So it's super important that you do not ignore what I'm saying to you right now because you may be thinking, oh, I don't want to listen. I want to help everybody. I can't say no to anybody. And I remember those days. But what happened back in those days when I would take on clients that really weren't in my ideal sector, they had just kind of popped up. And I thought, I have to help them because they just popped up. But what happened? That wasn't always the right thing to do. Now that I did learn from those, I would say, outlier clients, but they weren't in my niche. Was I able to serve them? Yes. However, it took a heck of a lot more energy and research to serve them as opposed to staying in my lane. And it's very comparable to running, which I happen to be a runner. I love running. I would seriously run every day if I could. However, I choose not to run every day because I know that I need recovery for my muscles and I truly embrace cross training. So I make sure that I do not run every day. I stopped that a few decades ago because well, I was training for a marathon, but the other reason why I stopped that was I was getting overuse injuries. The doctors would say, I'd have this going on, or, you know, my back hurt, or I was having um, a knee problem, and it all pointed to. I mean, they weren't acute injuries per se, okay, but it all attributed to what they said overuse. So at that point, that's when I decided, yes, I'm just going to run 4 days a week so I can do cross training and that can actually help to build my muscles up and be more resilient. All right. So I'm just thinking that we need to make sure that we are being super laser lucid clear on who are we going to help those people, and then duplicate those results. And like I said, it doesn't mean that you can only help that one type of person throughout eternity. You will be able to help others. But when I was saying yes more than, when I should have been saying no and staying in my lane, I was also kind of in a scarcity mode because I was, building my coaching business while I was still operating my healthcare organization. And even though I had partition times and partition days, there was still a lot of tension. And, if there was something that had to go, was it prospecting for my coaching business or taking care of my clients or a new referral we got? Well, of course, it was my healthcare organization because there were lives on the line. So, this gets into a completely different topic, but if you're trying to juggle two things or much less, have an existing business and then building another business, what needs to happen? Tell you what needs to happen very clearly. What needs to happen is you have to be diligent about partitioning your time, even if it's only for an hour or two. Like, let's say you're trying to build a side hustle so that you can transition out of your full-time gig. Then, figure out what can you do 1 to 2 hours a week. And then as you're building that, like let's say you're bringing on clients, maybe you only have 1 hour a week where let's say you're building a coaching business. So you have 1 hour a week. So that 1 hour is when you're taking coaching clients. Okay? Maybe it's 15-minute laser coaching sessions as an example. That's it. You have to have other time for prospecting. But then as you grow, you acquire more clients from your prospecting efforts, then you're going to open up more time on your calendar. But you have to be very diligent and you have to have boundaries. That's what I was talking about on my mastermind call earlier today. So no one else is going to be able to build those boundaries for you and enforce those boundaries. And especially when we are servant leaders, we're passionate about what we do. Sometimes we may, you know, not follow those boundaries. That is a mistake. So we need to make sure that we define the boundaries clearly, and then we, with love and grace, make sure that our clients follow those boundaries because it's for their benefit. It's for everybody's benefit involved. Okay. If you sign a client up, as an example, for a laser coaching agreement, those sessions are generally 15 minutes. That does not mean that you sign them up for 15 minutes and you give them an hour. You have to set the boundaries and then you have to stick with those boundaries. So, I hope this has been helpful to you tonight. But the main thing is, figuring out where you are to where you want to be and why aren't you there yet? And, lots of times what I found is it's not doing the right things. And the right things, it's such a small list. When you just consider it's, 80% of our revenue results are created from 20% of our activities. So that's, when people say three big things a day, maybe five, I like three. When you're looking at goals, that's on top of everything else you're doing. So let's say you're conducting sessions. I generally have run about nine or two, 9 or 10 coaching sessions on the days that I coach. So then I prefer to have three big tasks in addition to that. Okay. Sometimes it turns into five, but three, because it's very manageable, right? It's not a laundry list. That's why I talk about having a not to do list, because that not to do list is supposed to remind us of what we're not to do, you know, so that we stay on task. We're laser lucid clear on those very few, maybe three tasks that really, and strategies that really move, really move the needle in our business. I mean, we need to be prospecting every day. We have to focus on revenue producing activities. And then if you're enrolled in any courses, do not do that during the day. Well, do not do that during revenue producing activity time. Super important. So I hope these ideas were helpful to you. I'd love to hear your input. Were they helpful? Do you have ideas to share? Please share them in the comments. We can all learn from each other. But being in sales and creating the majority of my income from commissioned based revenue really taught me that I needed to be laser lucid clear on what I was going to do and not do during the prime time revenue producing hours. Because, in my case, a lot of it was, it was still cold calling on the feet, cold calling on the phone. And I, had a limited amount of time to do that in, right? So if I was going to do my cold calls, generally those were great in the morning, and then, before noon, and then I would schedule my in-person meetings or my feet on the street cold calling in the afternoon. And of course, there were some days when I would make follow-up calls, like let's say between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. But then I would just make sure that I had it switched so that I was still doing my cold call prospecting. Nowadays, we have options with prospecting, right? Some of it we can do automated, but automation is not going to replace the human touch. I mean, at least to the greatest degree. I know we have many advancements, and it's super exciting what's going on in our world, making things a lot easier in some ways. But let's face it, we still have to have that human connection. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you're pretty clear on what your 20% is. Do you know what you're supposed to be doing to get to where you need to be? Because it's November 1st. And this is actually, besides the fall colors that are all around us, this is my favorite time of the year. Not just because it's the season, but it's also the opportunity for us to get set up for success and to hit the ground running in 2024. So don't wait until January 1st or January 2nd of 2024. Let's get